All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Why is nobody talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars? 9-8, the winners of the AFC South, 5 straight wins to finish off the regular season. They had the most impressive comeback victory in the playoffs I have ever seen, probably down 27-7 against the Los Angeles Chargers. They end up winning the football game. They only lost to 7 on the road against the eventual Super Bowl champions in the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe nobody's talking about them because everyone's more focused on these big name free agent signings. Jacksonville this offseason prioritizing more so on the defensive side of retaining their current talent, retaining their current players. 2 off seasons ago, they made a bunch of splashes, and we saw, especially at the end of the season, I mean, seriously, they were 4-8, man. They end up winning a playoff game after being 4-8 halfway through, or a little more than halfway through the season. This is an extremely impressive team. We're going to talk about it in today's video, so be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. I do post a bunch of Jaguar videos as well, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let's try and get this video to 500 likes because I want to see more hype around Jacksonville. In Florida, in Jacksonville specifically, Jaguar fans are extremely thrilled about this team for good reason. It's hard to even put into words what Jacksonville was able to do last year. I think the Super Bowl hype, it's starting to come to an end here. We're less than a month away from the NFL draft, and hopefully people start to realize oh damn, Jacksonville is a legitimate threat for several years to come. It's being led by Mr. Trevor Lawrence. He had an iffy, inconsistent rookie season. The Jaguars weren't all that good, but this past year, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, threw for over 4,000 yards, completion percentage of 66.3. And also, you have Mr. Calvin Ridley. People are forgetting about Calvin Ridley. This guy, in the last season we saw where he was healthy, which was in 2020 with Atlanta, in just 15 games, or I guess now the season back then was 16 games, so he missed 1 game that season, 90 catches, 1,374 yards, along with 9 touchdowns, made the All-Pro second team. Calvin Ridley is a stud, and unfortunately the suspension and the injury a couple of years ago, the hype has died down with Ridley. But not for the Jaguars. They know what they're getting, and you're pairing him with not only a possible MVP candidate next year than Trevor Lawrence and a great rushing attack led by Travis Etienne. You're pairing him with Christian Kirk, who's extremely underrated in his own regard, and Zay Jones. Both of those 2 cats last year, 80-plus receptions. Christian Kirk ended with 8 touchdowns and 1,100 total yards. Zay Jones chipped in with a nice 800 receiving yard season. You franchise tagged Evan Ingram, who is one of the more underrated tight ends in the entire National Football League. This cat had 73 catches, 766 yards, and 4 touchdowns, and a good playoff performance. He does not run like a tight end. He is an absolute freak. And Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, oh my goodness, to an already top 10 offense? I mean, that's pretty terrifying in its own regard, but I think we all know by this point, hopefully we know, that this Jaguars offense, it's no small feat what they've been able to accomplish in honestly such little time. The defense was where the questions came to rise. Now, when you take a look at it as a whole, this defense got so much better by the time the season ended. They finished 12th in points per game. They did have a little bit of a sack issue. They weren't great in the passing attack. Good news is they got most of their all of their safeties back. Most of their cornerbacks will be returning as well. I anticipate in the draft a cornerback to be taken. You also have some edge issues, possibly. Only 35 sacks, which was in the bottom 10 this past season. However, you have Mike Caldwell entering his second year as defensive coordinator. And what did we see? I think the recurring theme for the second half of the Jaguars season was their defense made stops when they need to make stops. Think to that Dallas Cowboy game, or even think back more recently to that Chargers game. Their defense was getting good stops, and they compiled a good bunch of great games. The Jets, the Texans, they gave up just 3 points in both of those games, and in the year 2023, that is no small feat. Taking down Tennessee, a team that has for the most part, dominated the AFC South in the past couple of years. I think that game specifically, but especially the on the road victory in early December against Tennessee, it's a signal for things to come. Tennessee, unfortunately for them, they're going a little bit more downhill. Jacksonville's rising. And that's exactly what we saw in the last 5 games of the season, where 3 of those 5 wins were against divisional rival in the Tennessee Titans. But that Chargers game, to me, it really showed me a lot. You're seriously down 27-7. Trevor Lawrence was throwing interceptions. They were making mistakes. They were down 27-7. They end up winning the football game. That is absolutely unreal. If I were to tell you a football team in the playoffs, or even just in general, was down 27-7 at halftime, your quarterback ended up throwing 4 interceptions in that game, what would the likelihood you want be? Probably, at best, being generous, 1%. Well, Jacksonville, they did the impossible, and they ended up taking down the Chargers at home. And I know Duvall was very happy about that. The Kansas City game, once again, Kansas City was your eventual champions. This was a team that was, they didn't play perfectly. Trevor Lawrence threw for just 217 yards. It was definitely not a perfect, beautiful football game, but honestly, you lose 27-20 on the road against the Super Bowl champions in the second round of the playoffs. You weren't even supposed to make the playoffs. You weren't supposed to make the second round of the playoffs. The hype is huge, man. The hype is huge for very good reason. And I can't emphasize that addition of Calvin Ridley now that he's good to go. I think it's so huge. He's only been in the league for 4 seasons. That last year he got injured. So he's really only played 3 full seasons in the NFL. He's 28 years old. He's not too old. He's not too young. He's kind of almost a veteran now, but he's still on the rise. 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns for an Atlanta Falcons team that finished 4-12 that season. I mean, that is huge. I seriously am saying I would not be surprised if Trevor Lawrence for me is a dark horse candidate for MVP next season. I don't think that's that far-fetched, especially being in the AFC South. I don't know what the win-loss, I should have checked what the win-loss projection is for this Jacksonville team, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's not what it's going to be. I would guess they probably put it around 8.5, maybe 9.5 if we're being generous. This Jaguar team is a 10-win team. They're very capable of it next season. And once again, I know there were some defensive issues. You still have the draft. You picked up a couple of nice depth pieces, something you could argue Jacksonville was more lacking last season. This team's ready, man. The time is now. They went through their rebuilds, and last season was just a sign for things that are on their way, and we've already seen it. So the hype is real, or at least the hype is real for me, and I know Jaguars fans feel the same. And the NFL, whether they like it or not, they're going to be awoken to this relatively soon. So be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. But guys, let me know your thoughts on this Jaguars team down below. Let me know how you're feeling heading into next season, and we'll see you guys next time.